The beach is full of college girls going wild, and a party is in full effect. Then, we find out that it's all part of a news story that is talking about how Lake Victoria went from spring break capital to a ghost town thanks to a previously extinct species of piranha. By the end of the report, the anchor asks if this sort of phenomena can happen anywhere else and when it would happen. At Cross Lake in Arizona, two men go down to the dock to search for something, and they wade through the water while prodding the ground. Eventually, they come across a dead horse in the water, but when they go to pull it out of the water, we see that some sort of fish nestled inside of the carcass. When they use their lighter, the carcass expels enough gas to pop it wide open, and a bunch of the extinct piranhas swim out and eat the men. After that, we see a commercial for a big water park that Chet is promoting, and Maddie shows up for work at the park. When Chet sees her, he cuts the promotion short, but it's too late. Maddie notices some topless girls in the water, and Chet tries to explain his new business plans for the park. He shows her the addition of the adult pool area, but Maddie isn't feeling it. She reminds him that she owns 49% of the park shares, but that doesn't matter since Chet owns 51% and is her stepdad. That evening, the party goes strong at the park, and Maddie welcomes Shelby and Ashley to the party. Just then, Josh shows up, and Ashley talks about how the plan is for him to help Shelby lose her virginity. Also, Barry pops up and tells Mindy how excited he is to see that she's back in town. But they are interrupted when some of the local guys almost set Officer Kyle on fire. Kyle and Maddie have a quaint reunion, but meanwhile, Josh and Shelby have some personal time at the docks just outside the park. Shelby has the great idea to go skinny dipping, and Josh is all for it. Eventually, Shelby starts feeling something poking her underwater, but that poking turns into biting. Shelby decides to get out of the water, and she leaves Josh alone. Elsewhere in a van, Ashley and Travis are getting ready to get it on, but Ashley makes him pray before they do anything. After praying, Ashley handcuffs him to a pole, and he accidentally disengages the parking brake. The van rolls right into the water, and the van starts slowly sinking. Ashley goes to get the key to the cuffs, but it fell out at some point. When Ashley can't find the keys, she tries to escape to get help for Travis, but she didn't know that there were piranhas in the van already. As the piranhas start to eat Travis, Ashley sits on top of the van and calls for help. Back at the dock, Shelby and Josh make sure that everything is okay between them, and he assures her that he only has eyes for her. Back at the park, Maddie shuts down the lights and calls it a day. The next day, it's one day from the official reopening of the park, and everyone is already either drunk or at work cleaning up. Maddie goes to Shelby and Josh to see if they've heard from Ashley or Travis, but Shelby gets sick all of a sudden. Big Dave immediately says that she's pregnant, but that doesn't make sense because Shelby is still a virgin. Over by the water, Kyle watches as a tow truck pulls Travis's van out of the water, and they open it to find no one inside. Shelby decides to sit on the dock and talk to Maddie about how Ashley was like a sister to her, but they're suddenly attacked by a swarm of piranha. The dock splits in half, and Shelby has to leap across the gap to get to Maddie's side. Then, they both end up falling into the water, but they manage to swim to the shore just in time. Maddie catches one that jumps out at her, but they put it down before it bites either one of them. Kyle shows up and gives Maddie and Barry a ride to Mr. Goodman's lab so that he can prove his theory on the extinct piranhas. During the ride, Kyle rubs it in Barry's face that Maddie is more into him than Barry. Once they make it to Lake Victoria, Goodman brings them in and explains that they must be migrating in underwater systems. Goodman gives them a front row show to the power of the piranha species, and afterwards, he shows them some data that he's collected over the years. When he talks about a book he wrote, Barry's face lights up, and Maddie is impressed that he tried something she has interests in too. After hearing what a water park of piranhas would look like, the crew decides to make it back to Lake Cross before the park opens in the morning. Meanwhile, Josh lets Shelby stay at his place, and she opens up to him about her worry of Ashley. In response, she asks him to make love to her, and he can't believe that she just said that. Over at the lake, Maddie jumps in to check the drain pipes that connect to the water park, and she runs into some of the piranhas while swimming. By some, I mean a horde. Back at Josh's, the two of them get it on, but something is wrong for Shelby as something swims around in her abdomen. Pretty soon, Shelby seizes, and a piranha bites Josh's member. Josh goes to extremes, and he chops it off. When Shelby comes to, she finds Josh's little buddy on the ground, and she asks her what she did to him. Elsewhere in town, Kyle pulls Chet over, and he accepts the bribe that Chet pays him to keep his illegal business ventures on the down low. Meanwhile, Barry checks on Maddie, but that gets put on the back burner when Shelby shows up and gives a rough explanation of what just happened with Josh. Everyone rushes to the hospital, and after some time, Kyle tells Maddie and Barry that he'll stay behind to keep an eye on Shelby and Josh. Maddie goes home to take a calming bath, and she reveals that she got bit on her ankle while she was checking the drain pipes. While she relaxes, she closes her eyes, and she doesn't see the baby piranha drop out of the faucet. Suddenly, more splash out, and when one of them leaps at Maddie's face, she wakes up from her nightmare. The next day, David Hasselhoff relaxes in his hotel room, and he waits for the water park to open since he's there to make a guest appearance. He practices some of his music in bed, and his female guests get him pumped up for the pool party that starts a little later. When the park opens, Deputy Fallon from Lake Victoria also makes a guest appearance, but it's clear that he has a phobia of water since his massacre experience from Victoria. His therapist tries to remind him that they are there to take baby steps on his road to recovering from his trauma, and Fallon decides that his therapist has to just dump him in. They end up causing a scene though, and it ends with Fallon tossing his therapist in the lazy river instead. Finally, Chet addresses the crowd as he introduces David, and David does his fair share of audience pictures. Soon, Maddie decides to go investigate a sound she hears coming from behind the wall, and she notices that Chet has been drilling down into his own reservoir lake so that he doesn't have to pay utilities. Chet makes fun of her for thinking that he'll pump piranhas into the pools, but it turns out that he's doing just that. Piranhas start bashing their way into the pools, and kids start complaining about being bit in the pool. When little David tells his mom about his bite, she sends him to David Hasselhoff to get a Band-Aid, but Big David gets caught up by the fact that little David actually doesn't know who he is. Just then, more and more people start getting bit, and Maddie notices. When she tries to evacuate the pool, Kyle shows up and tries to escort her off the premises. Just then, chaos befalls the park as piranhas start terrorizing the guests. Fallon's therapist tries to escort him away from the scene, but Fallon decides to put on his shotgun leg instead. Fallon takes out as many piranhas as he can, and David is suddenly called to fulfill his fake lifeguard duties as he saves little David. Maddie runs for Chet, and she punches him as a response to him telling her that she was crazy for saying piranhas were coming. She rushes to drain the pools, but instead, she asks Barry to do it. Barry takes this chance to tell her that he's loved her since the 7th grade, and he also saves Dave on his way to the pumps. Chet takes a moment to look over what used to be his perfect adults-only pool, but he decides to grab his money and run. He ends up getting distracted by a woman's assets, and a banner slits his head off. Barry and David make it to the control room, and they activate the draining system, while Kyle goes to pull Maddie out of the pool. Kyle admits that he knew about the drill, and when he thinks about the repercussions of saving Maddie, he decides to let the drain pull her under. When Barry sees this, he jumps in to save her even though he can't swim. But when he thinks about the situation, he rushes back out. He grabs his trash picker trident, and he chucks it at a huge piranha that's going for Maddie. He manages to hit his target, but Maddie starts running out of breath. Suddenly, the pump burns out, and Barry ties a weight to himself so he can sink down to Maddie. When he gets her to the surface, he goes to resuscitate her, and this turns into a kiss of life. Back in the control room, Dave pours gas into the water pump, and he uses his roach to set it on fire. This blows the remaining piranhas to bits, and Barry's trident flies into the sky. When it comes down, it ends up on Kyle's head, and the rest of the survivors celebrate what's considered to be a win. Just then, Maddie gets a call from Goodman who says that the piranha are starting to evolve. Suddenly, the remaining piranhas in the pool start to walk out of the pool, and one takes little David's head off. Piranha 3DD is a classic gore-fest creature feature, and the perfect sequel to the first remake. And that wraps up this recap. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this recap, please subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss a single video.